Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 27th, 2023 New Bern Board of Aldermen meeting. The prayer tonight is going to be coordinated by Alderman Aster.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, as always, I try to get a city employee to lead us in prayer, and tonight I would like to ask Brenda Blanco, our city clerk, been a 22-year employee with the city of New Bern, to lead us in prayer, please.
Heavenly Father, we come to you with gratitude for another day of life. We thank you for the opportunity to be your hands and feet, sharing your love and compassion and serving others. For those who are responsible for making decisions on behalf of the city, we ask for wisdom and guidance. We ask that they work in the best interest of the people they are called to serve. And we ask that you pour out your favor and protection over this city, every citizen, every employee, and every leader. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
If you can, please stand while we pledge allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Creel.
Here.
Alderman Royal.
Here.
Alderman Aster.
Here.
Mayor Odham.
Here.
Alderman Kinsey.
Here.
Alderman Best.
Present.
Alderman Brinson.
Here. Okay, has everyone had a chance to review the agenda? If so, I entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion we approve the agenda as is.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. Consent agenda is next. It's a pleasure of the board.
May I make a motion to, make a motion to approve the consent agenda as is.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's have a roll call starting with Alderman Prill.
Alderman Creel.
Yes.
Alderman Royal.
Yes.
Alderman Aster.
Yes.
Alderman Kinsey.
Yes.
Alderman Best.
Yes.
Alderman Brinson.
Yes.
Mayor Odham.
Yes. Consent agenda is approved. Moving on to item number 11. Mr. Hughes, update on FEMA projects.
Yes, sir. At this time, I'd like to ask George Childs to come up and introduce our guest tonight.
Good evening, Board, Mayor. We've had several discussions and requests to the Board and Mayor to provide an update on the current status of our FEMA Cat A and Cat B projects throughout the city as it relates to Hurricane Florence. Thought it would be a good opportunity to have our consultants come give a presentation of how we started and where we are with certain projects and how we're looking to finish these projects. Certainly they'll be available for questions and I'll be available also. So I'd like to introduce Luke Baker, who is the project manager for TRC Companies, formerly Draper and Associates, the engineering firm that we've utilized throughout the FEMA project. And he'll give us a presentation with some overall facts and status on basins and where we are with the Cat A and Cat D. So turn it over here to Luke. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce Danny Meadows, who is a consultant with TRC also, who's also available here tonight.
Thank you.
So I thank you all for letting me be here tonight to speak and the opportunity. Again, my name is Luke Baker. I've been project manager for the FEMA recovery projects for TRC for the last about year and a half. I've really been involved with projects sort of since the initial kickoff back in 2020. So sort of just give some information of how our process really worked. I kind of wanted to go back to the beginning and really sort of give some more information about how we started. So back in 2018-19, FEMA began really sort of an initial field assessment of really spot locations and small portions of the city's drainage system to understand kind of the scale of the worst case scenarios in your drainage system. So they really kind of went to these areas that were known to be the worst based on public staff input or just general observations and really used that information to extrapolate a general allocation across the entire city's 80 miles worth of infrastructure. So once they completed that initial field assessment, we came in January of 2020 and began a more comprehensive field assessment. So that consisted of really just a field investigation of all 80 miles of the city's public stormwater infrastructure. One thing that's important to note is that it's any public infrastructure that is actively maintained. So that's going to be your pipes, culverts, roadside ditches, streams that are adjacent to some sort of public infrastructure or residential areas. It's not intended for, you know, these large, more natural streams, wetland areas like that. So that field assessment really continued through the spring of 2020. And during that process, we had an initial phase to look at what we'll call Category D, which is your permanent damages to public infrastructure. And then finally, Category A, which is any debris within the system. So that's going to be any sediment, trees, down debris, tires, cars, vinyl siding. If you can imagine it, we probably saw it. So after that initial field assessment, we began a preliminary engineering phase. So that was really to identify any sort of stakeholders or permitting issues that we would need to address up front, so that we had a basic understanding with those agencies as we move forward. It was also to understand general access constraints. Are there overhead utilities in the area? Are these damages or debris in older locations in the city that you don't have active easements, where we have to negotiate with private landowners to try to get in? And then really understanding what sort of engineering scope of services are going to be required for each of these. Is it as simple as just a detail and an aerial, or is it more invasive where we have to go from survey all the way through structural engineering? Lastly, or kind of at the end of the permanent damage aspect, is really just a review of public information. So trying to understand what the pre-disaster condition was versus what the post-disaster condition was, and if there's any elements that really contradict that everything that we're seeing in the post-disaster phase is disaster-related. So kind of one of the things that I'd like to point out as a case study is the Red Robin Trent Road project. So this was upfront identified as a critical project for the city. When we did this kind of upfront public information review, we noticed that there was some existing erosion on that bank from the Google Street View prior to Hurricane Florence. And so we kind of identified that, but this being a critical project for the city, we kind of pushed forward to try and get this through the FEMA processes. Unfortunately, they did also do this kind of public information review and identified that this area had some pre-disaster condition, and we were limited in how much repair we could physically do because of that. This project is being funded through another means, but this kind of gives you an idea of what you can run into if you don't do this upfront review. For the Category A work, we really needed to understand sort of biddable quantities of trees or sediment so that we could get a contractor in there rather than telling them, please remove this size tree. They have some sort of tonnage or something that we can base things off of. And then lastly is just a general cost estimation process. These projects are, in the construction realm, relatively irregular. It's difficult to bid a small area of erosion versus a large-scale linear pipe project or something like that that's more typical. So after kind of our preliminary engineering phase, and as we were sort of wrapping that up, we began the debris removal design and construction process. So the removal of this debris was considered the highest priority for the city, really just to reestablish the drainage capacity of your system. So we began that process as we were wrapping up our preliminary engineering in April of 2020, and through design, permitting, construction, all of our debris removal projects are now complete as of December 2022. And then I'll point out the before and after photo of an area on Peace Road, where you can see the top left is some sediment located in the channel, and then the final thing is that we've removed that debris and also installed an access road so that Public Works can now actively maintain this area. So these next couple slides are really just exhibits of where we identified Category A debris throughout each drainage basin. These will sort of progress as we move through each one as these projects were bid out. I won't spend too much time on each one. So in general, the red line that you're seeing on your TV screens are going to be your drainage basin boundaries. Any yellow you see are any debris we identified, either as sediment or vegetative or otherwise. And then any orange you see are pipes that we jetted, so they had some amount of debris that we cleaned out. So, Corey 2, I'll stop right here for a second. So So Jack Smith Creek was probably one of our worst-case scenarios that we saw as far as debris within the city. And you really got a sense of how widespread we looked at areas. And what we encountered was really small, well, not relatively small speaking, of locations of debris rather than expansive debris throughout the entire system. So we noticed that debris was collecting in low-lying areas at key culvert crossings rather than continuous throughout the entire system. So here's North Glenburnie, Rennie's Creek. One thing I will point out, Rennie's Creek does not have a very large amount of public infrastructure, and so in this area, because much of Rennie's Creek is highly jurisdictional, we performed what is really regulated by the Army Corps of Engineers and DEQ as in-place debris removal. So in these areas, really our contractors are restricted to foot traffic, boat traffic. We can't get heavy pieces of equipment in there. So they'll go in, remove that debris as reasonable, typically by cutting it off at the outside of the main flow path, dragging it out, winches, cutting it up into manageable pieces where they can carry it, and then securing that outside of the main flow path so that the next time that the waters rise up, rain comes through, the debris can't readily re-enter the creek. So, here's Riverfront, Jimmy's Creek, Trent River, and I'm happy to go back and review any of these in more detail as we work through, but just for the sake of time. So kind of as a summary for Category A, again, these projects are complete. We've removed the debris that we've identified and then some. This table here gives you really a breakdown of how much debris we removed across the entire city, of what we initially quantified versus what we performed based on tickets from contractors during the construction process. To put this in a little bit more easily to understand form, that's about 900 dump trucks load worth of sediment. About 100 loads of vegetative debris, 10 miles worth of this in-place debris removal, and 1.5 miles of pipes that we jetted that had some amount of debris. And the photos on the right really give you an idea of what that before and after looks for in-place debris removal. So you can see the main flow path is cleared, but the tree that overhangs on the edge at the top of the right has been cut off, and we've removed that debris out of the way. So after our initial Category A work, we really moved into the Category D work. The Quarry 1 and Quarry 2 projects were really defined as our litmus tests of how the reimbursement process was going to work after we were unable to move forward with the Red Robin project, which was a critical project for the city. So we wanted to complete these first to really make sure we, we're going to get reimbursed before we completed all the construction for the other basins, and then also complete the 3 critical projects that the city had identified. So all of these have been completed, designed, bid. As we discussed, the Red Robin Lane we're completing under another funding process, but those were our initial Cat D efforts. So where are we today? The remaining Category D basins are currently, design is complete of 4 of the remaining 6, or I apologize, 6 of the remaining 8. And then completion of the design on those last 2, Bryce's Creek and Wilson Creek, we should have complete in the next couple weeks. Really what I'd like to point out is that the environmental permitting process with the Category D work is much stricter and much lengthier than Category A removal. So vegetative debris removal is generally acceptable, provided you notify the agencies and follow some general guidelines. Category D is much stricter in how you remove it or how you repair it, quantifying how much you impact and not going over that amount. And so the process of giving them all that information is much longer. These agencies, much like every other industry we've seen, are understaffed. They have an extremely high workload. And so we're really at sort of their mercy as to how quickly they will review these things. And then lastly, at a bare minimum, the environmental permits for the Cat D have a minimum statutory 90-day wait time. So from our initial request to submit a package to finally potentially having something in hand cannot be any faster than 90 days. In a lot of cases, because of these delays, we've seen that extended from 4 to 6 months just because of the ongoing delays at the agencies. So again, I've got a few exhibits of some Category D work of where we identified the Category D. Again, red is our drainage basin boundary, yellow is our damages that we identified. Really what I'd like to point out is that in general, while we identified small point repairs that were needed throughout the drainage basin, In general, the repairs were not extensive, so they were mainly located at our low-lying areas, really towards the outfall of the drainage system. As we moved further upland, there was small issues at point locations, but not expansive. So I'll stop here. Again, Trent River, this was probably our worst case scenario of where we saw damages throughout the city. Again, you really get a sense of, in some locations, we had small point repairs, but in general, most of our damages are really located as we get further down the creek towards the outfall into the Trent River. Stop here really quick. Again, because Rennie's Creek does not have a large amount of infrastructure other than natural streams and wetlands, really the only culvert crossing is that one at Oaks Road where we identified a small spot of erosion. And then lastly, I know these are a little difficult to read. I've included some little bit better quality ones in the agenda packet, but I've got some rough schedules of how things proceeded throughout the project. So these first couple slides are going to be our Category A and our critical Cat D projects. And so really what I'm trying to convey is that as these work progressed, we're actively working on multiple projects at one time. We're not waiting for one to stop before we begin the next phase to really kind of continue this. So you get a sense of how Category A is really proceeding from January through 2021. And both of our critical projects for Cat D and our Category A work is completed by December of 22. At the end, there is an update on the remaining Cat D projects, so where we are now. We began design on these in May of 22, and they really progressed through last year and this year. As we discussed, the Category D projects are designed in 6 of the 8 basins. The remaining 2 are almost complete, and really just the permitting process that we're in right now. We are currently prepared to advertise the first one probably within the next few weeks, and really kind of advertise each subsequent one there within the next 2 to 3 weeks of each other, to hopefully engage contractors, keep them locally while work is ongoing. And then lastly, I just kind of want to point out, the end is in sight. I know we've talked a lot about where we at, how when is this going to be done? Really right now we're looking at being done with the construction side of things by the spring of next year. So while I know it's been a long ongoing process, the end is in sight. And then lastly, I just kind of want to talk about some of the benefits realized. So because all of the Category A debris work has been completed, we've restored the capacity to your drainage system. I've heard from Public Works that there's been a much less calls from concerned citizens about ditches backing up. That's great. That's what we want to hear. There's also been a large amount of access roads that have been constructed. These are now, Public Works can actively maintain these and use these to continue to access the drainage system in areas where they previously couldn't. Again, on the Category D side, we've completed our critical repairs, so the remaining lower priority items are not, they're not impacting your drainage system in a way that you're flooding or feeling issues because of what's remaining. And then lastly, the end is in sight, so to speak. So we're really at the point where within the next year we would feasibly be done. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sure, Alderman Aster.
Would you go back one slide, please?
Sure.
Almost double the amount of sediment removed than original estimate.
So we completed multiple areas that were not within the city database of public maintained infrastructure that at the time, because we had a contractor in the area, we mobilized them in to complete additional work under the same contract. So we tried to perform as much as we physically could and could identify and justify being Florence related. So that's where our overage is coming
Do you
from.
know what the total amount of sediment, cubic yards of sediment was removed?
Let me go back to this CAT. I believe
I tried to write them down as you went through them, but you were going through them too fast.
No, that's fine. So overall, it was about 9,000 cubic yards of sediment total, and that's based off of verified scale tickets from the debris monitors.
Do you know what was approved by FEMA?
I do not have the total number in front of me. I know it was much larger.
It was like 320,000 cubic yards.
Right. So I did do some review of that initial, what they, based off the allotment. In a lot of those areas, the debris that they said needed to be removed are either highly jurisdictional to the point where we would be restricted from going into these areas to perform that debris removal. Because of sort of the lag time between FEMA's inspection in 2018-19 and of the beginning of our field work, there had been some debris removal performed by Public Works just as a immediate need. And then two, the conditions that we saw at the time of our field assessments didn't line up as great with FEMA's initial assessment that is then, their initial assessment is kind of extrapolated across the entire system based on the worst possible areas that they can physically see. So what we saw after our comprehensive review was that the conditions that they assumed based on that worst 20% were not indicative of the entire system.
But theoretically, FEMA would have approved up to 320,000 cubic yards of sediment removed.
If we could identify those areas and defend them as Florence-related debris, potentially yes.
And secondly, this photo that you have here to burn away before and to burn away after, where exactly was that photo taken?
I would have to look back at my notes and find where that one is. This being an in-place debris removal area, it's going to be one of our more jurisdictional streams where we would have been restricted getting a piece of equipment in to perform any sort of sediment removal other than just, foot traffic, chainsaws, winches, that sort of minimally invasive work.
George, you know where that's taken?
Not exactly, they all look very similar when you look at these,
I'm happy to go back and look at my records and get you an exact answer of where that one's from.
That's it. Trent Village,
Yes.
when is that basin going to be completed?
The Trent River Basin is the next basin to go out for advertisement after Jack Smith Creek. So within the next month, we would advertise Trent River.
Okay. That's the one that we had the big overruns on, is that correct?
That Trent Village, I'd have to go back and look at the notes. Primarily, the money that's been spent in Trent River right now is on the Trent Village retaining wall. So that was one of those critical projects. We had some residential structures that were being threatened that we had to address.
Isn't that the $900,000 that's, George?
I believe the final cost of that with the retaining wall is a little over 600.
Right.
Okay. And you're thinking that we can get on bids on that real quick?
We would have to wait a minimum of 30 days, just because of the contract value, and then we would still be in our sort of waiting on the Army Corps of Engineers to give us our notice to proceed.
Well, it's been 5 years. Why haven't we permitted this through the Army Corps of Engineers? I mean, we got $900,000 of the city's money out there that we've already spent
Well, for the.
that we'd like to get reimbursement on.
I understand that. On the damage repair side, we really kind of have to identify where these impacts are going to be and put them in such a way that they really mesh with our design. So in a lot of cases, we have to have at least some 70% design ready in order to begin the permitting process. In the earlier stages, while things are still moving around and we're trying to gather survey information or anything like that, it takes time.
I understand it takes time, but 5 years for a ditch project, I mean, I would have thought that we could have had that thing permitted a long time ago.
Well, right.
Do we currently have anything on bids?
Not currently, no. The next one to come out would be the Jack Smith Creek Basin.
And how long has it been since we've had a bid opening on the Cat A or Cat D work?
The last Cat A project, I believe, opened in the spring of '22. At that time, that was around the time that we were working on the Quarry 1 and Quarry 2, which are sort of our litmus test projects. So we really wanted to complete those before proceeding with advertising any further.
Okay, so we haven't been on bids for anything since spring of '22?
We were actively working through the construction of those, but yes. We've advertised other projects aside from the FEMA project, the Red Robin Lane being one of those. But the last FEMA one came out in the spring of '22.
On the Cat D projects, how many of those are complete now?
For the category D,
D.
Yeah,
What'd I
so-
say, B? Sorry, D.
So on category D, we have completed really 3 of the 5 category D projects. So that's, design, bid, constructed. Of the remaining projects, they'll be disseminated into 4 biddable projects. Design is complete in 3 of those 4. We're just really working through the permitting process right now.
Okay. And the ones that have been completed, have they been submitted to the state for payment?
They have been submitted to the state for payment. I believe right now, we're just waiting for some feedback from them. I think currently on the Quarry 1 and Quarry 2, those have been submitted. I believe they're at about 50% reimbursement currently. I'm working with Kim Rose to finalize the last of the reimbursement and apply that. The Trent Village has not been applied for because that project is part of the greater Trent River drainage basin. So we were directed that once the Trent River basin was constructed, that project could be included in that reimbursement request.
How many outstanding requests for reimbursements do we currently have?
I am not aware of that number. I'd have to work with Kim Rose to figure that out.
Well, just to sum it up, I just think this has gone on long enough. I mean, this project's been 5 years, and for us to only, I mean, it doesn't seem that we've made a tremendous amount of progress. So that's, I would like to see it get wrapped up, and let's get these projects completed as quickly as possible.
I agree. I mean, we're at the point now where we see the end, we see the construction on the final damage repairs. Part of this delay is really just, there was that initial 1.5 year lag time between FEMA's original assessment, the RFQ for our the engineering services came out, procurement for that. So, while I understand it's been 5 years post-Florence, after our original field assessment and preliminary engineering, it's really been kind of this January 2021.
And I think another thing, and I appreciate where you are, but another thing you're facing is this Cat D, we want to make sure you can get your money back. And, we did, and it was determined that we would do this as a pilot, see how it works, see if they will reimburse. And as I understand, I think you've got 75% of Cat D back on 1 and 2, but you got 25% that we don't know whether they're going to reimburse you. So,
That's the overrun that we're
you
talking
gotta
about.
walk. You gotta walk a little bit slow.
Yeah. Well, we're
Unless-
prepared
unless
to
you want,
discuss. We're prepared to defend the overrun.
Okay.
So we need to get that basin finished so we can submit it as soon as possible.
Yeah, well, we're ready to submit now.
If Trent River is the highest priority because of the investment already in that retaining wall, we can switch the order of these projects. The Trent River design is complete while we're still working through the permitting process. If that one is the next one that needs to come down the pipe as far as a contractor, we can work through that, internally and get that out quicker.
Well, I'll leave that at the Foster. But I would think since we got so much money invested in it, we would like to get that one complete as quickly as possible.
Okay.
I understand, and the permitting, and Luke touched on that. The permitting on this is a lot different than Cat A. Cat A is maintenance, Cat D is not. They look at things a lot harder, and it's, and no excuses from anyone, but you did all this stuff through COVID, and you couldn't get anyone in the offices, the permitting offices, even talk to you, much less come out and look at the site, these kind of things. But I think it's moving along, and like Luke said, I think there's an end, and I appreciate what you're saying, and we will get there. If that's where you want to go,
Well, I'll leave that decision, like I said, at the Foster, but that particular basin has been one that I've been saying we need to get finished for a long time because we do have a very large investment in it.
Alderman Best?
Did I understand correctly, because I know we had discussed this a while back, that all of the Cat A work is done?
Yes, ma'am. So
Okay.
the All of the debris removal projects are complete. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my concern with this is, who's gonna actually, do a follow-up on these projects? To go out and take a look at these projects?
As part of the construction operations, we made regular,
And the reason why I asked that question is because a lot of this started back in what, 2021?
right.
And here
so
we are, in
So I would-
2023.
Right, so I was part of the initial field assessment from the really original damage identification, debris identification, through the construction projects. I was down here actively working with the contractors, performing weekly inspections as they're removing this debris. If there's additional areas we need to revisit, having them do that work. And then really, like, as construction was completing any further warranty inspections. So has any areas that we seeded, have they established, or do we need to come back and supplement? Is there, we were actively down here throughout all of these projects to really make sure we got everything completed at that time. And then are working still with Public Works if there are any lingering warranty items.
And the reason why I asked that question is because suppose some areas the project was not complete in some of those areas. Some of the debris or whatever, sediment, whatever, was not removed properly, or some stuff that was overlooked didn't get done. How is that who's gonna update that and let us know that it's gonna be taken care of?
I am not aware of any areas where we missed Florence-related debris. I'm happy to look at any additional areas that we can defend. Like I said, I've walked these ditches personally, all 80 miles twice, and then some during the construction operations. We actively look for additional debris to remove that we could hang our hat on, and I'll stand by that. I think we've got it.
Okay.
Two questions.
ma'am.
TRC stands for what?
So it's a bit of a debate in our office. So TRC has ties back to travelers insurance. So we believe that the T is somewhere with that. What we have been told is that TRC stands for the research company. So they have a large portion of the business invested in environmental research.
Second question, you made mention that with Red Robin Lane, there was some determination of pre-disaster, so
Yes, ma'am.
the funds were limited. I don't know if you, Mr. Hughes, can tell me, but what was the funds that was allocated for Red Robin?
So for Red Robin,
Oh, no, sorry. Go ahead.
for Red Robin, we've allocated American Rescue Plan funds for that.
Okay.
They did not qualify for the FEMA funds for Hurricane
I
Florence.
thought I heard him say that there was limited funds, if that was just a reference to ARP?
No.
No.
Okay.
On the previous slide that you had up, there was a category of miscellaneous debris. The estimate was about 30 tons, the actual was over 400 tons. Can you describe what is included in that miscellaneous debris category?
Sure. So miscellaneous debris is really just classified as anything that is not pure sediment or pure vegetative debris. A lot of the overrun related to the miscellaneous debris item was with some, what we initially thought was sediment removal from the North Hills Canal. When we excavated that material, it was heavily mixed with household trash, vinyl siding, tires, to the point that we could not separate that material out from the sediment. And so that's where our huge overrun of that line item is from, is primarily from that debris.
That was the point of my question, that
Right.
we've got a lot of areas then are being used as dumping grounds.
Right. So that, in general, miscellaneous debris was intended to be separatable, what FEMA identifies as hazardous debris. It's really anything that's not natural sediment or trees, logs, things like that.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Move on to item number 12.
Mayor,
Yes.
Mayor, we've got a few more things on FEMA projects.
Okay.
And the George is going to talk about, and this is also going to go into the BP project as well.
Okay.
Update.
Yes, I was going to provide several additional items that are covered under the FEMA Hurricane Florence allocations. One that you see ongoing right now is the brick repointing, and we are hopeful that that completion date will coincide with the completion of the elevator annex. So we're, the next 6 weeks, they should be getting very close. We've been very happy with the repointing of what they've done. The repointing alone and the reshaping of some missing window lintels, some of the larger stones, I think we'll see a huge value in the integrity of the exterior of the building. So we're looking forward to completing that right along with the annex. We also have, which has been brought up several times, is the FEMA reimbursement for the BP station, the BP project. So FEMA has obligated right now $934,878.60 for the BP station. And due to the fact that that location is currently in a flood zone, the choice to look for a change of scope with a potential other site or other potential project for the use of this money has been discussed. And we've got 4 that have been actively discussed internally, and I believe with several of the aldermen. And what we're going to do now is just kind of briefly go over those, looking for, I guess, some direction on where the board would like us to focus. The first one that had come up was a new facility or new structures for public works. And I've had a conversation with the city manager, and currently right now our site facilitates our needs. Personally, I think we could probably find better use somewhere else for this money. We're not in great need of space as other departments or other uses.
George or Foster, remind me, that conversation was to move Public Works from where they are to where the water facilities is, and then move Parks and Recreation from the Glen Burnie waste treatment plant to that.
That's correct, yes.
And we've had that conversation internally. My concern with that is due to our current size of site, and should we move to a new site, build a new facility, I think we'd be short-sighted to drop in the acreage size that we currently use. And then obviously utilize a lot of what Water Resources currently has available should they need to expand their facility also. So that was one of the ideas that was talked about internally. The next item, and I'll let the Assistant City Manager discuss this, is the possibility of a fire station for West New Bern.
Yeah, that's correct. There was questions about possibly using these funds to work a project with the public safety building that's being proposed over at the off the 43 connector. We have about 4.3 acres over there, and the plans right now are in the early stage where they're looking to combine both the police station with the fire station, but it can be done in phases. There's been one local municipality that just recently built a fire station, and that fire station was approximately 1,400 square feet, and it came up to be $7 million.
14,000 square feet.
I'm sorry, 14,000 square feet. And it was $7 million. And if we were looking at phasing down to just the fire department and say about 1,200 square feet, we'd be looking at approximately $4 million. So the amount that we have available from BP building, as you can see, will be very minimal compared to what we're looking at.
When, maybe I was asleep, but when did we talk about adding a police station to that facility? I've always just heard a fire station.
This current board has not talked about that. I believe it several years ago that may have been a conversation, and so I know when fire and police got together, they looked at a concept for that. That concept plan is still being worked on by NBF Architects. We haven't seen the final plan for that yet, and that's why the assistant manager made the comments.
So I'm curious, Alderman Aster. We identified what we thought was a need in your area on the other side of the river for a police substation. And you had the funding to do that, and I believe we were told that wasn't necessarily needed. And when I look at the proximity of the 43 connector down MLK from where our police substation is at the mall, I'm not sure that I see the need myself.
I think it's always, would be nice if we build a fire station and added some space to it for office space or something for police officers to be able to go and do reports and stuff, stay in their area and have a place to sit down. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about as far as the police and fire substation. I do recall a few years ago that we talked about building a fire station and put the upper floor as the emergency operations center. I know that was discussed at one time, but I don't. How big of a police and fire station you're saying? You're talking about 12,000 square feet now?
1,200.
1,200 is smaller than
12,000.
a small house.
Oh, I'm sorry, 12,000.
12,000. Yeah, $7 million.
I'm wondering if this was when we talked about a bond referendum. Do you remember that? Because that thing, we started talking about doing some improvements, and next thing I know, it ballooned into some, do you remember that? We were
I do
over
remember it.
Development Services, I think it was during a retreat, and we had
It
talked
was,
about that.
our finance director was supposed to have been the expert in that area and discussed it with us, didn't she?
Yeah,
What was-
I remember that, but my concern is if you said that somebody's working on a plan for this, we might need to pump the brakes on that if the board's not supportive of a public safety unit. Alderman Beth, think you had something?
Well, initially, when I had suggested the Public Works Department, Parks and Recs Department to move into the facility, but as Mr. Childs says, they're okay with where they're at with Public Works. But my concern was, I know when it comes to building a permanent fire department, you're talking about a large sum of money. And you got to worry about staffing, and you got to worry about yearly expenses. I wasn't speaking on the line of a permanent fire station because I know that the plans that Chief Board and some city officials have been working on the plan for a permanent fire department out on the 43 connector. Now, I am in agreement with that, and I think that's an ideal location for that. But my concern is this: we as a city, we got to make the best choices and the best decisions for our citizens. And how many times have we been told by NCDOT that this 43 corridor project was going to get started, and it's keep on being delayed or postponed? Now here we are. The last I heard, it was going to be 2025, and who knows that's going to be that project's going to start at that time. So I'm looking at it from a perspective of providing a service, a temporary fire department, as we had discussed out at the water treatment plant. We can still build in there, 4,000 square feet, if that, 5,000, I don't know how much space it would take to house a fire engine, so that we can have that service on the west end of New Bern. As all of you know, we're growing. This city is growing, and the growth is on the eastern side of this city and the western side of this city. And when you look at the housing that has come on the 43-55 corridor, you got Lake Tyler there with another phase of housing coming. You got West New Bern on the other end with the apartments and the houses and other phases coming. You got growth there. And I'm looking at it from a perspective of the service that we render to our citizens that live on the west end. The chief has already told us numerous years. He comes before us budget time. He tells us about the gap in service, the gap in response time. So when you look at that, you're looking at a possibility of, say, 2 calls come in at the same time. And you're looking at that, the time that it takes that fire truck to get there to service that customer. I mean, there's all types of incidents that can happen within that time frame because we don't have the availability of a fire department to get there in time. And I do know the chief, can't remember now what he had said about the distance of a fire department within a mile radius of a particular district. So we're missing that. So that was my initial concern, was that we take this money and use it towards a temporary fire station, or if the board is not amenable to that, or I don't know how the board feels about it, and I would like for you to chime in on it. Some of you would chime in on it to give me your feedback on it. I think that would be greatly appreciated. If that's not the steps to take, then Mr. Hughes, can't we take this money and put it in a project fund for a fire department?
If the board so chooses.
I know, if the board so chooses. Because there is no delays in time for us using this money, correct?
We would have to request a change in scope of work and go through the process that FEMA establishes for us.
No, I'm talking about for us putting it in a project fund.
In terms of the time frame,
Yes.
we would have to get verification from FEMA on that.
Okay.
Is it, just remind me, I think FEMA it's a reimbursable situation. It's like Stanley White, so they're not going to give us money for us to set aside to spend at a future date. We have to spend the money, then request the reimbursement.
Currently,
Okay.
funds are obligated, not allocated.
Okay. Well, that was my initial thought on.
Barbara, if I may, I agree with you. For years, we needed a fire station out on that side of town. I mean, for years. When I was chief, I was trying to get a fire station out in that area. What I am against is I'm against spending $500,000 for a temporary house when I would rather see us look at building a permanent house when we're ready. Building a house is the easy part. I mean, $4 or $5 million, $6 million, $7 million, I don't know ever what it ends up being. The hard part is buying the 2 fire engines and hiring the 15 firefighters. So we're going to have to look long and hard. I mean, we can finance the construction of the fire station, and it wouldn't hurt our budget at all. But you can't finance 15 firefighters. So we need to sit down and have some big conversations on that fire station project.
I concur with you, because we can't sit back and say we're gonna build a permanent fire station out there, considering we're sitting back waiting on NCDOT to start their project with the 43 corridor. How long are we gonna wait for this? How long are we gonna sit back and wait? And when I say temporary fire station, I was thinking about at the water treatment plant, this is something that if, Jordan, his department can utilize, refurbish it for storage or some other purpose after the permanent fire station is built. But that was just my take on it. I'm just looking at it from a perspective of we have to provide a service for our citizens in all areas of the city. And I just think that if we continue to put it off, we're gonna be 2, 4, 6 years down the line before we do anything else about a fire department on that end. So, if any other boards have any comments or what, I would like to get your feedback.
I'll offer a couple of comments. I agree with Alderman Aster that this is a very significant issue that needs to be discussed. This board has not had an opportunity to do that as yet, so we don't have a decision made as to whether or not we are prepared to move forward with a fire substation or a fire police substation. And until we have that decision and that commitment, we're kind of spinning the wheels. The next comment is really a rhetorical question, so I don't expect anybody to answer it. But given the fact that apparently this issue has been discussed for many years, I'm looking at the four colleagues sitting up here who have been on this board for many years, so obviously you have discussed this matter for many years. Why hasn't that decision been made years ago? And again, it's a rhetorical question.
Well,
I don't really expect an answer.
Well, I'll give you one. I don't mind sharing my thoughts with you. Alderman Aster and I have had quite the debate over this topic back when he was the chief, as I have with Chief Boyd. Alderman Best mentions the 43 connector. Alderman Aster had proposed, and correct me if I say anything wrong, Alderman Aster had proposed a parcel that was near, I think it's Faith Church on MLK, that would service really Ward 6 at the time, but not give a lot of service over to Alderman Best's area. And of course, with the 43 connector coming through, we looked at it. I think Weyerhaeuser has committed to give us property to build a fire station. So of course, property acquisition is zero at that point. So we're waiting for that to happen. And the idea was to split the difference between those two service areas and put the station in the middle, that, you know, to kill two birds with one stone. If the 43 connector never happens, I think an argument could probably be made that you would need two fire stations potentially. So we were trying to do that. The second thing is, when we talk about growth, and what Alderman Best is saying is, I think we could just take some of this funding, build a temporary station, but again, you can have a temporary station, but unless you make the commitment to put the firemen there to man it, we're basically in the same conundrum we would be in if we decided to go ahead and build a permanent fire station. So when we look at, and this is a suggestion that I would make, I would like to see from a financial perspective, because I don't want us to get in next year or the year after the same position we were in with this year's budget trying to make ends meet. I think what we need to do is take a look at all of those new developments that Alderman Best mentioned. Let's figure out what the tax valuation of those developments have been. And let's figure out, Kim, I don't know if you're quick enough to tell me this, but for $1 million a year, I'm estimating that's 3.5 to 4 cents on our new current tax rate that it would generate. I think it was 380 or 400,000.
71,000.
470. Okay, so 2 cents on the tax rate would give us close to $1 million, and that may be close to what we would need to pay for the fire station. So, how much growth, incremental growth, do we need in our tax base to generate that extra $1 million in ad valorem revenue? And then when we look at that, we could set some thresholds to say when these new developments kick in, because what happens is the city grows. We've got a lot of growth going on in Alderman Aster's ward, but we don't necessarily set funding aside to pay for these things. And what I think we should do from a strategic perspective is figure out where those thresholds are, and once we hit that threshold, then we know we need to start allocating and setting money aside to pay for this in the future. That's what my recommendation would be.
And as you said, with the growth comes residents, comes housing. So that right there is a potential growth in the tax base.
Absolutely.
So we still, you know, you're right. We need to really sit down and talk about this and get all the pros and cons and the information together on this, because I just see it as we need to provide a service to our citizens. If they come here and choose New Bern as their home as a resident, and then they're in a area that they don't have the protection and the emergency management services that they need, I think that's a problem.
Or McKenzie.
It's a great idea, but like you said, we all need to sit down to look at costs along with other things that needs to be repaired out through the whole entire city to continue to provide a good service. So that means that you're looking at taxes, things that folks don't like to talk about, but when you are rendering a good service, things go up. Things cost more money. So we have a lot of streets right now out through the whole entire city that needs repair. We got to look at that cost along with other things that we want to build and things that we have that we want to sell. How much money is going to come from all those things as well. So we need to sit down and get the numbers together and find out what are the priorities in the direction we're going to take to tackle the situation. And I think once that we can accomplish that part there is getting the cost of what everything is going to cost and what is priority to the city. And we can move on and to find out what we can do first.
Mayor, and to Alderman Kinsey's point, we are going to be undertaking a strategic plan this year, and I think our first sessions are going to be starting with the full board in August, and these are the exact discussions that are going to be held to talk about how we're going to move forward, especially over the next 3 to 5 years. What projects are we going to tackle? How are we going to fund those things? And really the priorities that this board has moving forward.
Yeah, that was going to be, my point was to ask if it was still in the budget that we passed. And just as far as I know, being on the MPO board for the 43 connector, it is funded. I know it was funded before, but that was when DOT was, thought they were flush with cash and then ran out of money. And so that was the delay, but the latest stop that we have still has it in there. They're currently in the property acquisition phase, as far as I know, and it's still on track to be 2025. But again, I think those are great conversations. I don't think we're going to solve it tonight, but you know, to have at a strategic planning session, which, you know, to Alderman Pruill's point, you know, some of us new folks have asked for. So I think I look forward to that coming up in August. And yes, I mean, I think we need a new fire station. It's a matter of when, not if. And so that's exactly what I think we're talking about here. But I do want to hear, I heard George say 4. We've only made it through 2. I'd like to hear the other 2.
Well, this was not intentional to put Parks and Rec behind the fire station, but that's just the way it fell out this evening in our discussion. So Carrie will come up and discuss 2 items that have been potential topics for the use of this money. One being a new Parks and Recreation Ground Maintenance Division facility, and then also there's discussion about the amphitheater at Mark Meredith Park, and I'll let Carrie discuss those with you.
Good evening. How are y'all? So the building of a new Parks and Recreation Grounds Maintenance Facility, highly desirable by my staff. Currently, the location is not ideal. Lack of space there for work as well as storage for equipment to keep it out of the elements to weather. Most of our equipment right now is stored outside. We don't have undercovered shelters or anything. That's including our mobile stage, lawnmowers, skid steer, other heavy equipment. So that project, like I say, is highly desirable.
And just so everybody knows, the current location is at the Glen Burnie Waste Treatment Plant. So
Yeah.
I'm sure Parks and Recreation doesn't like it being there. I wouldn't like it being there, so.
Yeah, and I mean, I know everybody's seen some of the work we provide out of that building. They build all the Christmas decorations there, and we're very limited on space. We have to clear out our whole shop just to construct those items. So, like I said, it's at the top of our list. And then additionally, the amphitheater. I think that's also a desirable project that a lot of people want to see. And Brenda has a handout with some examples of different amphitheaters that we've looked at that other municipalities have done. Some of them have currently been built. Some are concept plans right now. So I'll let y'all look through those, but Whenever we did the master plan for Martin Marietta in 2018, it was identified that a 5,000 seat amphitheater would be desirable out there. At that time, the cost estimate on an amphitheater of that size would be around $1 million. Like I said, that was 2018. We all know that costs have increased since then. So we're very much in preliminary stages with amphitheater information. There's a lot of stuff we would need to think about as far as infrastructure, construction of something like that, what it would take from the city to make this happen. So some of the things that we have talked about, and as y'all looked at the examples for the ones I've provided, I've got some in there that are 300 seating capacity all the way up to 7,500 seating capacity. They vary in cost. Some are managed in-house by the municipality. Others are leased out to promoters to run and contracted out with them, like Live Nation and other groups like that. So as far as a 5,000 seat facility, what we're looking at, some of the needs, of course, we'd have site prep, tremendous amount of that. The utility needs for electrical, water. To accommodate 5,000 seats, we would need around 60 stalls for restroom facilities, and that could either be permanent or a combination of permanent and porta-johns. We're looking at least 60,000 square feet of lawn seating to accommodate 5,000 people. That's at 12 square feet per seat. Parking for 2,500 vehicles, or either transportation to shuttle in people from off-site areas. Tour vehicle parking, staff parking, areas for food trucks if we want to have food vendors out there, and electrical for those. Of course, it's all got to be ADA accessible, so that's got to be thought about and put into consideration. And then you've got the back of the house, which is going to be the area where the band comes in, they load in, they're changing facilities. We're looking at about 10,000 square feet there. And, you know, you've got internet. We would need additional utilities for that. So that's kind of some of the information we've gathered. And then as far as it being a revenue generator, we could look at doing an enterprise fund for that. Of course, that would require increased staffing, tremendous amount of staff with experience running venues like that, being familiar with audio-visual equipment and lights. And then we would have to charge premium fees to help cover the cost for operations. So we wouldn't be able to offer these concerts and things like that at a minimal cost. We would have to be charging premium costs for that. And then to get the performers in to accommodate a stadium like that or an amphitheater, you're looking at $25,000 to $75,000 to get bands like that to come in.
Wait a minute, Carrie, let me ask you a question. Let me interrupt you because you're throwing out some big numbers here. I was under the impression that if we leased this thing to a promoter like, I think they're called Live Nation, just as one of them that's around. I think they do Walnut Creek, and they're also down in Wilmington, that they pay us rent for the facility, plus they pay us a certain amount for every ticket sold, plus they pay us a percentage of the concessions.
That's correct. That's if you do a request for a proposal for venue management.
Well, that would be the way. I mean, I wouldn't be in favor at all of hiring staffing to try to find the Grateful Dead to come to New Bern. I mean, you know, we need to leave that to the experts that do this for a living.
Well, I was just giving you options based on
well,
what it could go either way.
Sure. So tell me, did you talk to anybody about how much they lease it for to either Live Nation or what, other promoters? because that's my understanding, they take care of all the staffing, they take care of all the bookings, they do everything. We don't have to do a thing. It won't cost us anything in employee, as far as employees are concerned, to do something like that. So did you talk to anybody
We
about
reached
that?
out to Wilmington. They have 2 different amphitheaters. They have one that, and it's in the slide or the paper packet I gave you. They have one facility that has 1,200 seating capacity, and then they have one that's 7,500. The 1,200 one, initially the first 10 years, they ran it in-house, and then they contracted it out with Live Nation to do all the services. The 7,500 seat capacity one, they actually worked with Live Nation to design and construct that one, and Live Nation does handle all of the venue management for it as well.
So what does the city of Wilmington get out of it?
They do get a percentage off of ticket sales, concessions, as well as an upfront rental fee for the year. And they have.
And you have a clue as to how much some of that money might be?
I have some of it. They made, I
'Cause
don't
I've been
have it right
told-
here with me, but
And I don't know if it's true or not, it seems like it's in the $50,000-$60,000 a year range or something. Does that sound right, Foster?
I think it was around
I think it's
100.
a little bit more than that. What we saw with some of the agreements that Wilmington had signed with their venue operator was it was a quarterly lease that was paid for each facility. Then basically they paid $2 per ticket for every concert ticket that was sold. And then, of course, percentage like Carrie was talking about. Of course, what we don't know is if any venue operators have vetted the eastern part of North Carolina, specifically our area yet. So I know that staff has been trying to get up with the main person that's over in North Carolina with some of these companies to just talk about what potential plans New Bern has and if they would have an interest, and then going from there to see what kind of interest and what could realistically be worked out before we were to release an RFP for this.
Okay, so theoretically, if they're gonna give us, and we'll just split it and say $75,000 a year to rent the facility, plus $2 a ticket at 7,500, what is, that's $15,000 a concert, correct? You know,
If we do 5,000 seats.
well, that's $10,000 a concert if they sell them out, and their goal is to sell them out, because that's how they make their money. And then on top of that, a percentage of concessions and stuff like that. I mean, this could actually turn into a revenue maker for the city of New Bern. And it's and I can promise you, if you build an amphitheater, somebody's gonna come out close by and build a hotel and some restaurants close to it. I think we need to investigate it. It's a good opportunity for us to take FEMA funds, build something, and make money off of it.
Just a couple comments. So there's a pretty wide range here. I don't know who built the one at Goose Creek, but we don't want them to build ours.
It's
So
not built yet, it's a concept.
Okay, so 800 capacity at $4 million, and then Montrose, Colorado built a 5,700 capacity at $2.8 million. Now, that could have been 10 years ago. I don't know. We don't have that information, but I was just curious, like the Barrow County, it's the second to the last page. Is there a way to, because the thought all along when we've discussed this is making it expandable. I mean, I don't think we're going to start day one and go in and put 5,000 seats in. I mean, you can go in and put some covered seats or some seats up front and then have grassy area behind it like they do at Walnut Creek and sell long tickets and long seats. And then in the future, if it's successful, you can always come back in and add more seats. But my question is can we look at potentially utilizing this FEMA funding to do some site prep, site work, and potentially put a complex there that would accompany and support the amphitheater, that you could put your grounds crew there as well. Like the Barrow County, for example, I don't know what this is. It's probably restrooms that's behind here, but I'm just using it as an example. There's a structure there on the general site that you could maybe utilize that for. Because there's gonna be, like you said, there's a lot of infrastructure and stuff that's gotta be done. Do you do that with some FEMA money and build your grounds crew shelter or structure there, and then be able to build the amphitheater? That's just my thought.
I think some of the groundwork certainly could be done by forced labor, you know, and Foster has confirmed that. But I will also remind everybody that the 2018 master plan for the Martin Marietta Park included an amphitheater.
With, you know, the FEMA funds, whatever we rebuild's got to be out of the floodplain, so we would have to look at the location of Marietta and make sure.
Already done it.
Yeah, it's not it.
It's in good shape.
Yeah, I know it's not, but would that area accommodate a maintenance grounds facility as well as amphitheater, as well as parking? Like,
Yeah,
is
it
it
would.
all gonna fit?
It will, I can tell you. I'm not an engineer, but I can look at it and tell you it will hold all that.
How is that when it flooded during Florence? I don't, how is it not out of a flood area? It flooded during Florence.
There are some areas of Martin Marietta Park that flooded, the entrance
Okay.
did, the area, where the amphitheater is, and there's a high area on there, did not flood, so, and you can actually look up the flood zone maps, and it shows Martin Marietta Park and what's in the flood zone and what is not.
Okay, because I know there were some areas over there that did flood. Now, Carrie, didn't you say that at first you were saying about Parks and Recs, your department, for a facility there that would house the employees and will also be an area for your storage?
For what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
When you first mentioned the Parks and Recs department, you were saying about your space and your storage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so with that, were you also speaking of adding a building where you could house the employees for the Parks and Recs?
Yes, that would
Okay.
be housing the employees, their indoor workspace, as well as outdoor storage space.
So as the mayor was saying, the Barrow County, was that the one you was looking at?
Yeah, now, just as a thought, you know.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, you got the Parks and Recs department there, you know, you have your building there, and then you have your amphitheater there. That just, to me, makes more sense than just, you know, having an amphitheater.
My thought with that also is when you go out and you try to sell naming rights to get people to invest in that, if they see activity, they see the infrastructure and the work being done, they know that it's going to happen versus just going out and saying, hey, we're going to build an amphitheater, will you give us $1 million, put your name on it? I think you could get us a whole lot further down the road to get some income that way.
Carrie, the area that you're looking at for construction, would that be when you come in going to the right? Where do you have plans to put that site in place?
In the initial master plan, if you go around on the right side and drive the loop that goes around, to the right side of that loop, there's an open space, and that's initially where the amphitheater was.
That's where you plan on building I'm talking about the park for Parks and Rec.
Well, we haven't identified a location
Oh,
for
okay.
the Parks and Recreation maintenance shop.
But I'm familiar with that part there.
Over at Glen Burnie.
Yes, but I didn't quite understand the part that would become available for the Parks and Rec, for the vehicles and things of that nature there. Because if you go to the right when you come in, I think it's blocked off now. It's pretty wide back there. I don't know the space that it is back there, but it's a pretty large area. It's a little lake back there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So, yeah, I think the next step that we would need to do with this project is to have Carrie or Foster to talk to some of the promoters, is that what they're called? You know, like Live Nation, and I can't remember the name of the other one.
AEG.
Okay, and see if they're interested in coming to Newbern, and if they are, what can they provide us? You know, I think naming rights is another thing that we wouldn't have any problem getting naming rights for such a facility. And I think the other thing is that, is Corey on the line? I think I'd like to hear from Corey to see if he thinks changing the scope of work for an amphitheater would be an issue, yes.
Just curious, four projects, is there one more?
And so, one other project that had been discussed is the possibility of, can you use FEMA funds to rehab houses, like in the Duffyfield community? And Corey Spalding, who is our consultant that helped us through the FEMA process, he's on the line as well. I had a conversation with him about this today. The biggest issue with that is that projects must be located out of the flood zone, so that may not qualify. But Corey, if you can hear me, if you'd like to expand on anything that we've discussed.
Corey, can you hear us? Are you muted?
Let me add, I look forward to us digging deeper in our strategic.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Did you hear the question?
I believe the question was that is the Martin Marietta Park acceptable for a scope of work change for the FEMA funding for the PP building? Was that the question?
I was having a hard time hearing him. Corey, what the question is that I had was using the BP funding and doing a scope of work to support an amphitheater. Do you see any difficulties in doing that and having that request made through FEMA?
I don't see any problem with that, and we actually reviewed the location, and it appeared to be acceptable and outside of the special flood hazard area, and any of the normal problems that you would come across with FEMA for a change of scope of work didn't appear to be impacted at that location, so it does appear to be acceptable.
Okay. You want me to ask the second question about rehabbing? Corey, if you can still hear me, the next question is, can this FEMA funds be used to rehab homes in New Bern?
You have all kinds of problems with that because you're transferring public funding to private homes, which, although I've never had that question asked of me, I don't think that you can do that. You have all kinds of insurance implications because you have to provide insurance on the facilities. You're transferring money from city-owned property, I guess, to private property, and I don't think that that's allowed, but I would have to actually research that. I'm pretty sure that it's not. If the city owned the buildings, it would be fine.
And from the little bit of research that when I heard about this, I was doing some research as well. If any of the funds are used to refurb a home and then the city sells the home, wouldn't we have to return those funds to FEMA?
I know at a point in time previous to this, we had discussed building homes for, I guess, low income in New Bern, and then selling the homes to those people that the homes were built for. And once you transfer the title, the money has to be recouped and sent back to FEMA.
So I guess it's safe to say that if it's a public building, whether it's a fire station, whether it's a Parks and Rec office or an amphitheater, if it's a public building outside of the flood zone and it meets the FEMA criteria, we should be okay going with a change order or change of scope of work. Is that fair, Corey?
You hit almost all the criteria on the head, yes. And it's basically you can use an alternate project for something that you feel would best benefit the city of New Bern, but it's directly related to New Bern-owned projects.
So, Mr. Hughes, is this amphitheater a point of discussion when we have our strategic 5-year planning
Absolutely.
Okay, because I would like to get additional information on this as well. We're talking some numbers here, big numbers here.
Well, I'm not sure when you're planning on having your plan and stuff in place, but we need to move on this. Whatever we do with this funding, we need to move on it. We've got the FEMA's attention and we have the state's attention, and we need to make a decision on what we're going to use this money on. Whatever we do with it, we need to make a decision and move on it quickly.
Alderman Royal, you were saying something before Corey got on the line?
I was, thank you. I was going to say that I look forward to the discussion and the strategic planning meeting, and that we can move forward and perhaps get a better view of where we need to spend the money. The other thing I wanted to mention too, Ms. Carey, going forward, if we could have a presentation that we could view, that our viewers, our citizens at home could view, along with those that are in the room here, so that all of us as citizens, we could get a viewing of what's being presented to the board.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Alderman Kinsey?
And moving forward with the discussion we are having now, so we're going to give, the board is going to give the manager's direction to bring the information back to us, or we're going to do it in the planning stage with the strategic plan. So that's when that's going to take place, correct?
I think what I'm hearing is we're going to have a strategic planning session. It's going to kick off in August.
That's correct.
That we could certainly talk about this. And I'm also hearing from Alderman Aster that I don't know that we have 2 months that we want to wait to figure that out. Because if we start discussing an amphitheater in August at a strategic planning session, it may be 2 or 3 months before we actually make a decision that we want to move forward with that. And that's just more time that we're spending with the FEMA money sitting out there.
Yeah, you got to remember, how long did it take for the scope of work to be approved for the Stanley White Center?
Well, that's where I was going.
Well over a year, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So, it's just in our best interest to move as quickly as possible on whatever we decide to do. Build the building back, or change the scope of work to do another project in the city. Whatever that project is, we need to get Corey working on it and get it submitted as quickly as possible.
That's what I was trying to get an understanding in. Which direction are we going to give him now, or are we going to wait later? That, if the board is going to make a decision that we can do it earlier, before August, to move expeditiously.
John,
I don't know.
Johnny Ray, I agree with you, but I think what we need to do before we can make a decision is we need to get some more facts.
That's what I'm saying.
And these facts need to be gathered as quickly as possible so we can determine which direction we're going to go.
That is my
We
conversation.
need to find out if this is going to be a money maker for us, or a whole bunch of money thrown into Martin Marietta Park.
Well,
I'm thinking, Carrie, did you talk about to any of these other cities and ask if this was a money maker, a revenue maker for them?
I have not. Wilmington was the only one we were able to gather information from in short time. We tried reaching out to a couple others today, but couldn't get any responses.
Okay.
So that is my conversation, is to have the manager, we give him direction to go ahead and bring back before the board, then a decision is made, therefore we know, like you just said, if it's a money maker or not. So therefore, as a board, collectively, we can make a decision.
I second that.
Alderman Britson? I don't think that was a real
I
motion.
know.
We're talking about motions. What it sounds like to me is we need to have a work session next month. And, if you need that in the form of a motion to do that, I'm willing to do that.
So I was going to
Right here.
suggest something like that. We've heard 4 projects. Is this what staff would view as 4 top priority projects, or is this just based off of feedback that you've gathered from the board through conversation?
A combination of both. And could we come up with some more projects? Absolutely, we could. one of the things we've talked about is at some point, we need to look at consolidating some of our departments into a larger building. And so does that include rehabbing one of our existing larger buildings to add on space? But that could be a project as well, and then selling some real estate.
McKenzie.
Back to you, sir. Let's look at the main priority right now that we really need more so than anything else, and bring back to the board to make that, along with your request, which will be the number one priority to look at, that will move us forward. Not something that we'd like to have, we want to have, but we really need more so than anything else. An amphitheater sounds great to me. I love the idea, but we need to make sure that we're looking at the needs of the city. And so with you and the board collectively making the right decision to put it all together, and the finance lady that can count, we know exactly what we can afford. What do you think about that, board?
I think there's a lot of discussion. I think there's a lot of information that needs to be gathered before we can make a decision.
And that's what we're giving him directions to do, to gather that information to bring back where we can make that decision. So
is the board opposed to taking the 4 projects that were discussed tonight and having staff get more detail from a fire station to an amphitheater so we can make some educated decisions? Is everybody good with that?
And a Parks and Recs
But
facility.
what is the fourth?
Yeah.
Because
The housing, but I mean,
well, but the gentleman
The public
indicated
would-
that would be problematic, so we're really talking about 3
About 3.
projects,
Actually,
although
that's
Foster's
correct, because the
indicated
public works did not need additional
Yeah.
space.
Okay. So basically, we're determining whether we want to invest this FEMA money in a fire station, a temporary fire station, or an amphitheater / parks and recreation facility, because I believe they could be viewed as one.
Well, are we talking temporary fire station? Because I'm not in favor of spending money on a temporary building, because then we're gonna vacate the building, and what are we gonna do with it? We don't need that.
It can be
If we're gonna
refurbished.
make a commitment
It can
to a
be-
fire substation,
fire
then let's
station,
make that
Martin Marietta,
commitment
let's
and
make
move
them all.
forward.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, we're talking
serious.
about $900-some thousand. With a project like a fire substation, an amphitheater, which would probably be a close second, a building for recreation, offices as well as equipment, say third, the bulk of that FEMA money is going to be used for engineering studies, architects, all of that good stuff that has to be done up front. Foster, with that in mind, where's the money going to come from that we have to spend before we can get reimbursed? We don't have it in
Naming
the budget.
rights.
We would have to allocate funds for that and then be reimbursed as FEMA would allow
So
us.
we would be depleting surplus.
We would have to pull from fund balance.
Yes.
Naming rights.
No,
This-
that's way down the road.
No,
Bobby, you're
not
looking
necessarily.
at an amphitheater as being a profit-making. I guarantee that you're probably going to find out they're not profit-making. I don't know that, but don't keep hammering away on, this is going to be the panacea for New Bern. We're going to have money flowing into our coffers
No,
like crazy.
I haven't
We
said
don't-
that.
we
You're
don't.
imagining stuff, and I have not said
Bobby,
anything like that.
Every time you
I
brought
don't
up
want
the
to hear any more of
amphitheater,
this.
you talked about it being a profit center. We don't
And how do you know that it's not?
We
But
don't
I can just
know
tell
that.
you from the research that I've looked into, when you start leasing a building out for $100,000 a year and $2 per ticket, as well as concessions and stuff, it can be a revenue
New
generator.
Bern in eastern North Carolina, we have no idea whether or not this market can support.
Well, that's
a
exactly
facility
the
like
reason
that.
why I asked Foster to call Live Nation to see
Okay.
if we have a market here or
All
not.
right, all right. I'm going to make a comment. I'm going to give it to Alderman Best. I don't think anybody up here is an expert at an amphitheater or marketing. But I can tell you this, I've been to several concerts at Mayola that have sold out in the past 2 or 3 years. It wasn't 5,000 people, but it was a couple thousand people. So there were people there from all over eastern North Carolina that came there to those events that I was personally at. So I do know, and if you all don't hear it and you're not listening, but there's always conversation in this community about things for people to do and activities and youth and things like that, and this could be one of those facilities. Alderman Best.
Foster, can an amphitheater operation be set up as a enterprise fund?
It could be set up as that.
Alderman Best.
Mr. Hughes, Jordan, will you please come forward? I want to ask a question.
Jordan's thinking, how did I get drugged into this?
Oh, of course, because of West Newbern, what a treatment plant.
I like an amphitheater as much as the next guy, I guess, but, yes, ma'am.
What I want to ask you is this. At your facility at the water treatment plant, don't you have some bays out there already that you're using for storage or whatever?
Yes, ma'am, we have several different storage shelters and equipment bays that house materials, equipment,
Okay.
and as well as some staff.
Is there where additional footage can be added on to what you currently have there to temporarily build a temporary fire station? Is it a metal bays that you have?
In a current configuration, it'd probably be difficult to add on to the existing buildings.
Okay.
However, we do have a lot of acreage that sits outside of the existing facilities that could be used for really any city function.
Okay.
There's roughly 55 acres available that we haven't utilized. A lot of that is wooded, and a lot of that is really unusable. But there's probably a solid 7 or 8 acres of uplands that's adjacent to the existing facility that could be utilized for additional city function.
If a temporary fire department is put there, isn't it where you could utilize that building in the future for other purposes, for the water treatment plant? It could be refurbished for other purposes?
I'm sure if there's an empty metal building there, we would find a use for it. Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Brinson.
Okay, we've established, we're given staff direction to look at 3 different options, but again, we have not established a deadline. The 11th of July looks like a very busy meeting. I think it's a little too soon. If August is too late, is the 25th of July meeting too late? And so again, I come back to, we need to have a work session if that is too late. So, no good task is good without a deadline.
Foster, is staff going to have time to collect all the information that we're talking about in 3 weeks?
I think we could get some good information within 3 weeks. We may not have everything we want. I know that staff has been attempting to reach out to some of the promoters, and there have been a lot of phone tag on that, but I think 3 weeks we could have some good information for the board.
Well, but that's just on the amphitheater.
That's right.
We're talking about a lot of information that would be needed on a fire substation, a decision as to whether we're going to have a fire or police substation, which is a board decision that has to be made, and that decision hasn't been made, so you're going to play a guessing game. You're going to have to do double work looking at both options. A recreation building, again, what are we looking at in terms of size? So
Well, Marvin
it's
already
a
gave us
lot of
some of that
information that has to be compiled, and it needs to be good information.
Yes.
And I'm just asking, we're talking, I don't think there's any magic deadline out there that we have to make a decision by August, unless I'm mistaken. I just want to see that we do this the right way and not rush into something and make a hasty decision. There's time. Unless somebody can demonstrate that we are under the clock on utilizing or making a decision so that we can start spending fund balance money to do all the preliminary work that has to be done, and then, a year from now or more, we'll get reimbursed?
It'll really all depend on FEMA. I say this to you, Alderman Priel. Let me report back at our meeting on July 11th. That'll give me time to get with staff. We've got a holiday period that's getting ready to come up. I can get with them. We can talk about how we're going to move forward, and I should have a better time frame to be able to come back to the board and report that. And it may be in the form of a workshop, or it could be at another board meeting coming up.
So at the July 11th meeting, you're going to discuss whether or not the timeframe to have this discussion at a later date?
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on this item? All right, thanks staff for their presentation. Moving on to item number 12. Consider adopting a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract for the Northwest Interceptor Rehabilitation Project Phase 2. Jordan, I believe this is your presentation, sir.
Mayor, members of the board, what you have before you with item number 12 is recommendation to tentatively award the contract for the phase 2 of our Northwest Interceptor Rehabilitation Project to In Situ Form Technologies. To give you a little background of this project, some of our veteran members may remember this is a project we identified the need for quite a few years ago. We had a major sewer collapse along Glen Burnie on the Northwest Interceptor. As part of repairing that, we did some closed circuit TV work of the whole interceptor and found a lot of deteriorated concrete in the top of the pipeline. So our hydrogen sulfide gas in the sewer system had deteriorated the cement in the concrete, where we had a lot of exposed aggregate. We're seeing a lot of cracks. Basically, the structural integrity of the pipe is greatly diminished from what it should be. So we implemented phase 1. We lined about 3,000 feet of the most critical, which was the first 3,000 foot as you come down Glen Burnie, and we've continued to monitor the remaining sections. We've had one additional sewer collapse, and fortunately it was right at the treatment plant. We were able to mobilize and take care of that a few years back. The phase 2 project will line about 2,000 foot of 36-inch concrete pipe through some of the hardest to reach sections. So these are areas that are deteriorated, in very swampy areas that if we were to have a collapse on this portion of the pipeline, it'd be very difficult and very expensive to get in there and make the repair. So we want to try to get this portion of the project done and then continue to monitor before we pull the trigger on phase 3. So.
I just had a question. Any reason or just coincidence that both of these contractors are out of Missouri?
I think one is a parent company, one's a spinoff of the other one. So I think In Situ Form Technologies was the original company. I think a few employees, a decade ago, created a kind of a subsidy of that. They're literally across the river from each other in Missouri. One's in James City, one's in New Bern type of situation.
So is this a specialty type project that not a lot of people around our area does?
We actually do have local contractors, fairly local. We have contractors on, closer to North Carolina, closer to eastern North Carolina. Unfortunately, nobody's interested. There's a ton of work out there right now. A lot of ARP-funded projects nationwide. This is not an easy one. This is a messy project. It's a difficult one. We had to bid it twice just to get the 2 bidders that we got. And these prices are quite a bit higher than what we saw in phase 1. These prices are about twice what our estimate was from a couple of years ago. So this type of work, being specialized and this being not the low-hanging fruit of the lining world, this is going to be an expensive project to get done.
Okay. Board have questions?
So Jordan, is this a project that you can maybe possibly get grant money through North Carolina Department?
Very good question, We're very fortunate with this project that we've actually got a $230,000 direct appropriation from the North Carolina ARP fund. So when they allocated some money for water wastewater repair, a lot of it went into a grant program where you've got to apply for those grants. We are ineligible for applying for those grants. However, we're very fortunate to get a direct appropriation of $230,000 to help out with this. So we're very appreciative of that. It goes a long way in helping us with the project.
Anyone else?
So you're telling us that this is a project that takes precedence over the other, this is phase 2 of it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you already completed phase 1, phase 2. So is there a phase 3?
There will be. In the future, we'll pick up where this one stops, about another 3,500 linear feet.
Okay.
It'll come out of Trappers Trail, cross Oaks Road, and run down Glen Burnie Drive to the treatment plant. That pipeline, that portion of the pipeline is in the best condition of the entire run.
and it's the easiest to access. So if we were to have a problem tomorrow morning on that section, on the Phase 3 section, it'd be a little easier to mobilize a crew there and make a repair. Where this portion, the Phase 2 portion, really runs cross-country behind the DOT yard on Glen Burnie, through the swamp, comes out the back of Trappers Trail. It's very difficult to access. It's in a very wet area. We want to make sure we get this pipeline stabilized before we do have a problem that makes it, and presents us with a very difficult repair.
Do you think you'll be able to try to, if there are still available ARP funds out there that maybe no one has, I don't know if you've
Yes,
looked
ma'am.
into it, or
Alderman,
get
we
additional
are
funding?
always, yes ma'am, we are always looking for opportunities to try to bring grant funds or other funding sources in to try to minimize our financial impact for day-to-day operations or capital improvements. With all of the state level ARP funds, all the money that's been given to the state, whether it's been through ARP or from the bill funding that's coming out, they very efficiently run it through a single program that the state already has set up. Through the drinking, their water infrastructure program. So North Carolina already had a very good application process and scoring system for ranking projects and figuring out who gets money. So all that federal money is routed, in North Carolina, routed through that same application process. We are ineligible for applying for those funds. So unfortunately, all the money coming in, we really can't, we don't have a stab at that, but we continue to, we are in constant communication with Gold Leaf. They've been very supportive of some projects over the years, and we've got a few feelers out there with them. We got a little ways in a recent round of funding, and they decided our project wasn't selected, but invited us to come back for the next round of applications. So we're continuing to look where we can. Unfortunately, it's just very difficult for New Bern to get our hands on any of the grant money. So
let me ask you another question. Wouldn't this be considered an environmental issue if this problem is not resolved?
It very well could. If we were to have, we operate a collection system permit that's issued under the state of North Carolina. Condition of that permit, New Bern is responsible for maintaining these pipelines and making sure we do not have failures. So yes, it is critical that we take care of our infrastructure and make sure we don't create environmental issues.
Thank you.
Jordan, is it fair that the big money that's available is usually under regionalization? I mean, we had a meeting, I guess it was several months ago now, with I think it was River Bend and Pollocksville and Trenton, and we were looking to get other smaller townships to come together so we could get more
There
funding.
are several buckets they kind of established when they split up the initial round of ARP funding. I think some of the bill funding will do the same. They're trying to encourage regionalization, so they put a lot of money towards that. If you come up with a real good regionalization project, that had a high likelihood of getting funded. There's some other things that have real good likelihoods of getting funded. Like I say, it all rolls back to the initial application process, just some of the conditions of the application we don't qualify for, so we're kind of ineligible for those.
Okay, it's a pleasure of the board on item number 12.
I don't know if anybody else had any comments, any other members? If not, I'll make a motion. Mayor, I make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract for the Northwest Interceptor Rehabilitation Phase 2 project.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Royal.
Alderman Royal,
Yes.
Alderman Aster,
Yes.
Alderman Kinsey,
Yes.
Alderman Best,
Yes.
Alderman Brinson,
Yes.
Alderman Priel,
Yes.
Mayor Odham.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
Item number 13, consider adopting a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with TRC Engineers for on-call engineering services. Mr. Chris Seberg, you are up, sir.
Evening, Mayor and Alderman. What you have before you is, for consideration, is a professional engineering contract. We've received requests for qualifications from 6 qualified firms. We're looking to have this as an on-call aspect for bidding, construction administration, construction oversight. And the period will be for initially 3 years with possible 1-year extension if needed. You have the scoring sheet of all the reviewers. We had 5 staff members helping the review process from various departments. to keep it equal, and TRC Engineers was the top rated firm. And that is all I have on that.
Board have questions?
Is that the same?
Foster, this is not a new process for the city, is it?
This is the first time we have done this, to my knowledge. And the main reason this is being done is because of the grant projects that we've got going on. We just don't have the capacity in-house to manage some of these. We've got so many going on. So looking at getting a firm to manage some of these projects. And the main one is the Duffield Stormwater Project, which is approximately a $6 million project.
Is this TRC the same engineering firm that's doing our FEMA stuff?
Yes, sir.
And they would just be brought in on an as-needed basis?
That's correct.
And we have funding in the budget to cover this?
It's covered by grant funds.
Okay.
So if we select this service and this company, and 3 years from now, when that contract is up, and we decide to hire them back, then it'll be covered by grant then? Is there gonna be an ongoing grant service that will provide the payment to this company, the expense to this company?
Well, for the duration of this proposed contract, it would be covered by grant funds. So
Okay.
really moving forward, if we decided to enter into another agreement with this firm or any other one, the goal would be for a grant to cover that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And so what we're seeking, this service that they will provide, it coordinates with the services that they're already providing?
No, they're currently providing services with the category A and D FEMA cleanout process. So TRC, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is a larger firm. They've got a variety of divisions that deal with a variety of things. And so I don't know that it would be the same. And Dan, you may be able to speak to this as well. I don't know if it's going to be the same staff that are currently doing our Cat A and Cat D projects. It may be a different entity from that.
TLC has all manner of different types of engineers, structural, electrical, and basically what this is, and I can't hear real good, but it's on call. There's no cost to you unless something pops up, and what an on-call contract basically is, it kind of helps you if you're in a bind and you need something pretty quick. Then you call this engineer, and they'll come in and do the work for you, and that's all you're going to charge you is that time. But as far as the company, pretty much the whole gamut of engineering, civil, and structural, and all, we're actually out of Cary, so we have offices all over the world, as a matter of fact. But
Alderman Kinsey?
No, Danny answered my question.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Alderman Best?
So, from a city perspective, wouldn't a city engineer be able to pinpoint some of these problems? You're saying this is going to be an on-call service, but shouldn't a city engineer be able to pinpoint some of these problems, and then we go from there to select whomever the engineer company that we need to hire at the time? I mean, I know we don't, do we have a city engineer on staff now as it is? No?
So Jordan Hughes serves as our city engineer.
Okay.
And one thing I want you to know, Jordan Hughes also runs the Water Resources Department. So one of the issues that we've run into with the variety of FEMA projects and the American Rescue Plan projects is stretching staff to where they can't concentrate on certain things. That's why we're having to look to contract out certain things so we can kind of rein these projects in and get them completed in a timely manner.
Keep me straight, Mr. Hughes, you're right, and thank you for mentioning that. And I'm glad I asked the question. Thank you for mentioning that, because we don't want to put any more burden or stress or extra work on our employees. Thank you.
What would be the process? I mean, is it going to be your decision as to when TRC would be brought in, assuming they get appointed this evening?
Staff that are working on whatever projects would bring it to my attention and let me know when they would need someone. And basically, Community and Economic Development Director and Public Works Director would be the main ones that would be looking at these projects and letting us know what help they need.
Are you anticipating that this firm's services are needed currently with any projects that we have ongoing?
I believe with our current Duffield stormwater project, that's when they're going to be used the most, which is about ready to take place.
Yeah, phase 2 and 3 of the stormwater enhancement project down there in Duffield, we are looking to put the contract out for bid in the next couple of months, and that construction management aspect will be needed for that project.
So if we don't bring a firm on or don't have a firm that we can call in, then things are going to slow down?
Exactly. It's covered by a grant. That's the best thing about it. When we wrote the two grants, though, we received a $4.5 million grant, a $2.5 million grant, so to speak. We wrote this in place because we've seen with some of the big funds that we've had that internal staff has had some struggles to try to manage these projects internally. We realize we need some assistance.
So would it be fair to say that, given the fact that the city has been quite successful in securing grant funds for a lot of projects, that we've set ourselves up to need these outside professional services?
Yes, to successfully complete them in a timely manner.
All right, and that's not a bad thing. I don't mean that to be a bad thing. That's actually a very good thing for the city. The fact that we have been very aggressive and been quite successful in securing grant funds.
Go right ahead, ma'am.
If there's no more questions by the board or discussion, I'd like to make a motion. Mayor, I make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with TRC engineers for on-call engineering services.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's have a roll call starting with Alderman Aster.
Alderman Aster?
Yes.
Alderman Kinsey?
Yes.
Alderman Best?
Yes.
Alderman Brinson?
Yes.
Alderman Creel?
Yes.
Alderman Royal?
Yes.
Mayor Odham?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Chris. Item number 14, consider adopting a resolution amending the classification pay plan for fiscal year 23-24. Ms. Hayes.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. On June 13th, I came before you and you approved the classification pay plan for fiscal year 23-24. That pay plan only incorporated position title changes, reclassifications, and one new position that was proposed in the budget. So subsequent to you approving that classification pay plan, you also approved a 3% cost of living adjustment effective July 1 of this year. So I'm back before you tonight with a revised pay plan, asking that you consider adopting a resolution to approve the revised pay plan that incorporates the 3% cost of living. So simply what we did was took the ranges and shifted them up by 3%. So that is what you have before you tonight to consider.
Okay. Board have questions?
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a resolution amending the classification pay plan for fiscal year 23-24.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's have a roll call starting with Alderman Kinsey.
Alderman Kinsey?
Yes.
Alderman Best?
Yes.
Alderman Brinson?
Yes.
Alderman Creel?
Yes.
Alderman Royal?
Yes.
Alderman Aster?
Yes.
Mayor Odham?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 15, consider adopting an ordinance to amend the West New Bern Water System Improvements Project Fund. Ms. Ostrom.
This ordinance amends the West New Bern Water System Improvements Project Fund by $88,500. Funds will be transferred from the water fund to the project fund to cover additional engineering costs. So I ask that you approve or adopt the ordinance to amend the West New Bern Water System Improvements Project
What
Fund.
was that? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Did it?
The last part you said.
Oh, so I just ask that you consider
Okay.
adopting the ordinance for the West New Bern Water System Improvement Projects Fund.
There's no questions?
Board have questions?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to adopt an ordinance to amend the West New Bern Water System Improvement Project Fund.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Best.
Excuse me, Alderman Best,
Yes?
Alderman Brinson,
Yes.
Alderman Creel,
Yes.
Alderman Royal,
Yes.
Alderman Aster.
Yes.
Alderman Kinsey,
Yes.
Mayor Odham.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 16, consider adopting the final budget ordinance amendment for FY 22-23. Kim, my only question is, are you sure this is the final one?
It has to be.
Okay.
A final budget ordinance is adopted annually to revise the current year's budget to ensure that all projected expenditures have sufficient budget and to realign the revenues to equal the appropriations. The attachment that's on there, I'll go briefly over it. We are, for general fund, a total net reduction in appropriations of $49,000. There is increase of $1,200 for MSD, which was hanging tags. And then we also have the water fund net difference for appropriations is zero. We're just moving $1,000 between two different divisions. The sewer fund is a net reduction of appropriations for $596,000, and the electric fund is a net reduction of $587,000. The employees benefit insurance fund has a net increase of $600,000 in appropriations, and that was due to high claim costs. And the solid waste fund has a net increase of appropriations of $285,000, and that was for the GFL contract. Section 2, the estimated revenues, we have added back to fund balance. I'd like to point out for general fund for this is about $395,000, and the MSD, an additional increase in revenues was $1,200 for parking fees. The sewer fund, a decrease of $596,000. And that was due to overestimate in the revenues for anticipated development. The electric fund has a net amount of $587,000, but we are reducing fund balance by $2.8 million, $2,853,000 for the electric fund. The employees benefit insurance fund is offset, that $600,000 offset by increased revenues of $268,000, so we're appropriating $332,000 from fund balance. And the solid waste fund is reducing fund balance by $285,000.
Does the board have questions?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the final budget ordinance amendment for fiscal year 2022, 2023.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. I just chuckled because that was a whole lot of money and a whole lot of numbers, and it went really, really quick, so you can tell we're getting later in the meeting. So, any discussion on item number 16?
Not necessarily. That means that we trust our finance director.
What a question of trust, but there's a lot of numbers there.
It is a question of trust.
Okay, let's have a roll call, starting with Alderman Brinson.
Alderman Brinson,
Yes.
Alderman Creel,
Yes.
Alderman Royal,
Yes.
Alderman Aster.
Yes.
Alderman Kinsey,
Yes.
Alderman Best,
Yes?
Mayor Odham.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Item number 17 is appointments. There's a litany of these. I'm just going to go through them on the agenda package. First one, we have Alderman Royal. You have an opening for the Board of Adjustment.
Still seeking that individual.
Okay?
And let me add, if there's any board members who might know of someone who's interested, if you'll forward me the information, please.
Okay?
Mayor, also with the Board of Adjustment, we received from Brenda that there are 2 alternate candidates who are eligible for reappointment.
Yep, that was the next page.
So
Yep.
that action could be taken tonight if we wanted to.
Yep, that is the next page, and page 115 for those following along. So it looks like Mike Duffy and Kathleen Marty, their terms are up June 30 of this year. They're both alternates, and they are both eligible for reappointment for a 3-year term. So that's open to anyone if you wanted to make that motion.
Well, if nobody has any objections, I'll make a motion that we reappoint Mike Duffy and Kathleen Marty to continue in their alternate positions for the Board of Adjustment, effective July 1, 2023.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Alderman Royal. Any discussion?
More of a question.
Sure.
Since we're reappointing them to alternate positions, is there a possibility to appoint one of them in Alderman Royal's position should they decide they want to do that?
That's a good point.
I mean, that's
I
obviously
will
up to
follow
Alderman
up.
Royal, but.
Given that information for me to follow up, can we?
You want to table?
Yes, please.
I'll withdraw the motion if you
Okay.
would like to check on and talk on both of those.
All right. You good with that, Mr. Attorney?
Yes, sir.
All right, that motion has been withdrawn.
Thank you.
So, moving on to the next one, Alderman Royal, you have an appointment to the HPC, Historic Preservation Commission. That is currently held by Ruth Cox. Her term has expired, and she is ineligible for reappointment.
I have not identified that person.
Okay?
If the board is aware of someone that would like to serve, please notify me.
Okay. Alderman Best, Gregory Rush's term on the HPC is expired on June 30. He is eligible for reappointment and desires to continue serving.
Yes, he does, and I would like to, for Mr. Rush to be reappointed to their HPC board.
Second?
All right, so have a motion and a second for Mr. Rush.
Second.
I got a second from Alderman Pruitt. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Rush is reappointed. Alderman Kinsey, you have an appointment to the Planning and Zoning Board. Raymond Layton's term is up June 30, and he is ineligible. Do you have anyone for that yet?
I do not, sir.
All right. Next is Alderman Brinson. You have an appointment for Planning and Zoning Board as well. Pat Doggery's term is up, and he is ineligible for reappointment.
Defer to next one.
Okay.
Or table to next meeting.
All right, the next one are 3 appointments to the Civil Service Board. That's open for anyone. Does anybody have any they'd like to make tonight?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that Mr. Mark Devaney and Mr. Ken Daub be appointed to the Police Civil Service Board.
All right,
Effective
let's
7/1/23.
do those individually if you don't mind. So your first one was Mark
Devaney.
Devaney.
He's the gentleman, he had expressed interest last year to be appointed to either I think the Planning and Zoning or to the Police Civil Service Board. So I'm just making a recommendation that we allow him to get started in service to the city through the Civil Service Board.
Okay, I have a motion for Mark Devaney for Civil Service Board. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second, Alderman Royal. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then your second one, sir?
We received from Brenda this afternoon, I believe, that a Mr. Ken Dowd has expressed interest in being appointed to the Police Civil Service Board as well. So I'd like to make a recommendation that we nominate him for that position.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second for Mr. Dow. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's an aye for me. And Alderman Aster, 2 noes. Okay. Next one is appointments for the redevelopment commission. You see that in the package. It was actually listed in our agenda that we would discuss this in August, but it's just there for informational purposes so we can continue to recruit people for that role. Any questions regarding that?
So,
So give a name tonight of a recruit.
If you have anyone you want to submit tonight, we can, but I think what we discussed the last meeting, the attorney can correct me, Ms. Lee has resigned and her term is not up. So if we were theoretically to make an appointment tonight, then we would have to reappoint that at the end of that term. So he suggested we make that in the next meeting. Now, Commissioner Tabari Wallace is up for reappointment, and he is still in the seat, so I'm sure if somebody wanted to do that, we could just continue, and he could continue to serve.
Has anybody discussed it with him?
I have, and he wants to continue to serve.
Oh, good.
Well, I have a name I want to throw in tonight.
Sure, go ahead.
His name is Jimmy Dillahunt,
Okay,
and he turned his resume into Brenda today.
okay. So,
Brenda, you received 2 resumes from Mr. Jimmy Dillhunt?
No, I only received the one that you submitted.
Okay, because I was going to submit for recommendation Mr. Jimmy Dillhunt as well.
okay,
And we have, I believe, 2 other individuals who have expressed an interest to serve as well.
that is correct. So the board now has Jimmy Dillahunt, Ms. Carol Beckton, and remind me who the,
I'm not sure how to pronounce the first name, Agape Adams.
okay,
We've received a resume from her as well.
okay. So that's the ones we have now, so we'll make that actual action at the next board meeting if everyone is good with that.
Can you list the names again? I know you said Mr. Jimmy Dillhunt, Ms. Carol Beckton, and
Agape Adams.
I don't believe I received a copy of that resume, did I? When did you send it out?
I can push it out again, but it went to the whole board.
I don't remember that one either, but I get a lot of emails, so I wasn't gonna expose myself. All right, just wanna make sure, because there's a lot of them. That's all the appointments. Did I miss any from anyone? All right, attorney's report.
Nothing to report tonight, Mayor.
City manager's report.
2 items for you. About a week and a half ago, we had our kickoff meeting for the strategic plan with internal staff. We are going to be working with the School of Government on this project, and one of the things that our consultant wanted to do was have a meeting with the manager, the mayor, and at least 2 governing board members who would like to be a part of the planning of this before the entire board gets together. So if the board would like to determine 2 aldermen that would like to participate in some meetings in advance for the planning, we'd love for you to do that.
What day and time?
Don't have days and times yet. We'll basically be working with your schedule on this.
How soon do they want to do this?
I think within the next 3 weeks or so.
Okay.
After the holiday at some point.
Can I make this suggestion? How about if we are we waiting on them to give dates or us to give dates?
We need your interest, and then what we'll do is we'll get Brenda to work up the schedule and see what the availability is.
First of all, does anybody have interest to sit in on that meeting?
When is the meeting again?
We don't know yet. So right now, it's just a matter of if you have interest, then we're going to determine
Did you say
when.
when or what?
What is the
Oh,
meeting?
sorry.
So this is for our strategic planning. Our consultant would like to meet with the manager, the mayor, and at least 2 governing board members to just talk about the process and what you'd like to get out of this. Just get your feedback.
I'd be interested.
Okay, Alderman Prill. Anyone else?
I'd be interested.
Alderman Royal, Alderman Brinson. So I'll tell you what, let's do this. Everybody is obviously going to have input to provide when we go through this process. I will tell you my schedule is going to be very tight for the next 3 weeks. So how about if I circulate my availability to the clerk, and then she can circulate that through the board, and the first 2 that respond are in.
I'm responding.
Okay? All right, we'll go that route. Okay.
And the goal is, at some point in August, to have a work session that is at least a day in duration. So Brenda's going to be, after the holiday, Brenda's going to be reaching out for availability on that, and that's when we're going to kick this process off.
And I'll also throw this out there, if there's 3 others that want to meet with them, I can meet with them individually if need be.
Okay. Only other thing for you tonight is as a reminder, the 4th of July holiday is coming up, so city offices will be closed next Tuesday. We will be offering the 4th of July celebration at Lawson Creek Park. That event starts, I believe, at 5:30 p.m. We'll have musical entertainment, food vendors, fireworks will start at approximately 9:15 p.m., and you should be able to see them from the majority of locations along the water in the city. So hope everyone has a safe holiday. Join us.
Very good. Let's move on to new business. Alderman Creel.
I have one item. I think everybody is familiar with the Questers volunteer group. They do work over at Cedar Grove Cemetery. They, working in conjunction with the city. Some of the work involves restoration of the markers and the gravestones. Typically, what they end up having to do is bring an outside company in to make those kind of repairs. What they would like to do is have one of their members, Mr. John Barnes, attend a couple of different programs that are up in Pennsylvania. Essentially, what he would be doing is acting as a kind of a train-the-trainer program. So he would go to these courses to learn the process, and with that knowledge, then he could come back and train other members of the Questers organization in the kind of repair and restoration work, and in essence, try to do as much as they can in-house as opposed to having to bring in contractors from outside. The cost for these programs, for the tuition, materials, and supplies that are needed, along with just travel expenses for Mr. Barnes to attend these, is $2,860. I'd like to make a motion that ARPA funds be made available in the amount of $2,860 for Mr. Barnes to attend this program.
What funds?
What's that?
What funds?
ARPA.
ARPA,
Oh.
the ARP funds.
Do we have any left?
Do we have a second?
Provided he has some funds.
Alderman Creel has approximately, as of right now, $13,000 available in funds.
Okay. So do we have a second?
Yes, sir.
Second by Alderman Aster?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess, I know there's restrictions with all that, so staff is good with that allocation? Okay.
So just so everyone knows, this is reimbursable, so they'll basically pay for their trip, and then they'll just submit that information to the city, and they'll be reimbursed.
Okay. All right. Everyone clear on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Royal.
The infamous question, the streets in Duffy Field. Mr. Childs.
Yes, the streets are still on track for the week of June 10th for the milling contract to move in with the paving contract.
What was that date again?
For July 10th. The week of July 10th, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, sir. Ms. Alderman Roy, may I impose on your time?
Please do.
Since we have Mr. Childs here and I have to bring him back. I have been getting phone calls and from citizens that live on Lincoln Street. They're talking about, well, the street was already in bad shape, and they're talking about with all the traffic that's been coming through there because of this paving project has been on, for whatever reason, that we haven't paved the streets over there in Duffy Field. And I would like to know if Lincoln Street can be put, I'm making a suggestion here, and I know it has to be approved or whatever, but if Lincoln Street could be part of the fiscal year 23-24 paving project.
We can certainly evaluate it to include it, and we're actually looking at some side roads, some collector roads in that area.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
That is all.
Alderman
Thank you.
Ward.
All right. Alderman Aster.
Nothing tonight, sir.
Alderman Kinsey.
Not tonight, sir.
Alderman Best.
Yes, I had one question to the, I guess, city manager, Mr. Hughes. Can you tell me what explanation did the city receive, the reason why the rural transformation grant was denied?
We have reached out to the state Department of Commerce to find out. We've yet to hear a comment from them, so we're waiting to hear.
Okay.
We'll get an answer one way or the other. We'll keep hounding them until we get one.
Yeah.
So they're not required to give an answer for denial of a particular grant, or?
Some organizations will tell you they've scored on points and things like that, but they have not given us anything yet.
Okay, all right. And that was it, sir.
Okay. Alderman Brinson.
Since last meeting, I attended the Women's Veterans Luncheon. There was a great turnout there. It was good to listen to some of those stories that they had and celebrating their veteran status. Also attended on the board's behalf the Marine Corps Installations East Change Command at Camp Lejeune. That command basically ranges from here all the way down through South Carolina to Georgia, and so very much Marine focused. Also made remarks at the food bank fundraiser last week, and happy to report at least what was shown on the screen, they raised more than $75,000. But I was told by the director afterwards that there were some people that did not want to get recognized, so there were some checks handed in afterwards as well. So it was very successful for them, and glad to see that they are moving into their new facility on Red Robin and have a whole lot more capacity and capabilities than they had when we went through both Florence and with COVID. So very happy with that. And then lastly, today's my anniversary, so I'd like to wish my wife a 31st anniversary.
Congratulations. Is that all, sir?
That is all. Thank you.
All right. Just two quick things. I've mentioned this before, so I'm going to mention it again. The street lighting on Eden Street. That is a extremely dark street. I continue to get concerns about that next to Trine Palace. I don't know if there's street lights there.
I don't believe there are.
And they can't get to them because of the trees, but there's a public parking lot that's across the street, and it's pretty dangerous. So if we could have that evaluated, please. And then, I don't know if this is for you, Mr. Hughes, or Mr. Childs. The sidewalk, the underground infrastructure that's taking place downtown, it looks like it started, now it's stopped. There was no notice. I received 3 or 4 phone calls from businesses downtown. They were not aware of that, and now there's no work being done, and sidewalks are blocked. So what's the deal with that, if you don't mind?
Yes, the fiber installer, Segra, was actually the one performing the work, and they had received an encroachment agreement after months of going through it and through HPC on how this would be installed. Unfortunately, we were not notified when they mobilized to start their work, so we did not have a pre-construction meeting to go over the stipulations of that encroachment agreement. We have met with them on site now. They've altered their plans a little bit, so it'll limit the current impact. So after the areas that they've got pulled for fiber, they're going to close those up, and they will not return for some time if they elect to do the back end of the fiber. So we're looking at tomorrow. They're supposed to have the installer to put the pavers back on, especially in front of the Pepsi stores, so we'll start restoring the sidewalk to prior construction.
And there's also, in front of Tom's Coins and Antiques, there's a big section that they've got blocked off. So do we have something in place now to where just anybody can't come downtown and start tearing up the sidewalk, or anywhere in the city, as far as that goes?
We have to, by general statute, allow certain utilities access to our right-of-way. With that, though, we have the ability to provide oversight and requirements to how they do their work in our infrastructure. And in this case, since we already have so many proposed fiber or utilities downtown, and through HBC's approval, any handhold, so when you see the plastic lids on the sidewalks, any place that we have what we call an improved sidewalk within the MSD, so the pavers, we're requiring them to have the actual lid is going to be below the pavers. So that is requiring some additional work. What we were afraid of with all the new fiber companies coming in, our entire improved section of sidewalks are going to be nothing but plastic lids. And this was a way to regulate that appearance, and that was also a part of the HPC approval.
Okay.
And we do apologize for it happening this way. We were a little taken back when they all of a sudden appeared.
Yeah, I think they came in on camp weekend when there was a lot of parents dropping kids off at the camps, and it was a mess. So, thank you. All right, I do know we need a closed session to conduct the 6-month review for the city manager. Is there anything else we need a closed session for?
Not that I'm aware, Mayor, and that's pursuant to 143, 31811A6.
Need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Have a motion.
Second.
Have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of going to closed session say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are in closed session. Okay, we're back in open session. Is there any more business to come before the Newbern Board of Aldermen this evening? If not, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Have a motion by Alderman Prill and a second by Alderman Royal. All those in favor say aye. Aye.